To start with, Raghupati, Mr. Raghupati, wanted to check with you, can artificial intelligence and digital analytics be leveraged to build a structural efficiency to the working capital management? And just wanted to know how prevalent are these technologies in the country?
Yeah, thank you, Vijay. And thank you, Inventicon, for inviting me to this wonderful session with esteemed co-panelists and all. Thank you. So, Vijay, to answer your question, yes, that can be made. In with reference to our industry, which is steel industry or any other manufacturing industry, if you see, in our steel industry, what happens is that the input raw materials like iron ores, coal, manganese, silicon, etc., the prices are very dynamic, and also a seasonal element is also there, and it depends as we import it from many countries, then those global impacts are there. For example, manganese ore was something around 14,000 rupees per ton 15 days ago after the start of the war, and most of this is imported from Ukraine. After the start of the war, it has jumped 50%. Right. So if we use artificial intelligence and the analytics here, then we will understand what is the price trend in the years, and the seasonal variations are there, so that we will be ready with to counter it. Like if the coal prices are going on because there is a China issue cropped up last month, last 2 months, then the coal prices jumped up 30-35%. So if we understand these kind of situations, so that we would manage our working capital in such a way that at the time the prices are low for the raw materials, we could purchase that, store them and all. So this is the best part of it in terms of your raw material cost and all. Then on the prices are too dynamic. In the last 30 days, the sales prices has gone 25% up. Now there will be reverse trend also will be coming in the next few days. So if you have advanced analytics with you, and this is not something new that is happening for this time. For years, these kind of fluctuations are happening. So if we could, with advanced analytics, predict these situations, then our response to the market will not be a reactionary mode, but we will be ready with that, so that we can have a better margin for our products. And to answer your second question, there are not much advanced analytics at this point of time that is being used. We have developed certain tools with ourselves and the basic understanding of the market, and that way we are running with it. But it is required in the future. It is required.
So, just wanted to check: are you guys actually looking into or meeting some vendors in terms of developing this tool and trying to fix this particular issue, that price fluctuation for input as well as for the sales piece?
We can see if there is a proper product and all. We will definitely analyze it, because it will be value addition.
So how currently it is getting managed? Are you guys doing manually, or how is it being monitored?
Mostly manually. Mostly manually.
Okay.
It's kind of a sharp business acumen that you have. You have the experience of how it happens, how it goes and all. Couple that with your advanced Excel sheets.
Okay.
It's mostly manual.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ramamurthy, any input from your side?
Yeah, so look, I have a slightly different view than what Raghu just mentioned. I think from a working capital perspective, let's be very honest. Working capital has high dependency on sales. And I'll ask Fripp the question to come back and say how many organizations really use machine learning algorithms to actually predict sales very well. To be perfectly honest, Vijay, I think in your industry, you use it more to come back and say which player to buy or not. And I'm sure you used to use a lot of that in the recent auctions. Yeah. But I think that's a reality. But having said that, right, the second part of the problem is, Working capital, when you talk to working capital to most CFOs, the first perception is, how can I get my suppliers to give me longer pay terms? Right? That's the go-to answer for everything. But where my view is, especially coming from my experience in telcos and retail industries, the world has changed around with us. To give you a very quick example, most of my customers and postpaid customers, they have a due date, right? And the question, and using analytics, we actually discovered that if I tell my customers a message 3 days before they actually make a payment that your bill is due, I can get 50% of my customers to pay on that date. If I tell them in the morning on Monday when they're going to office, pay your bills, the probability of getting paid is more than sending it on a weekend, right? So I can predict customer behavior based on analyzing and mining my data and actually use it to improve my receivable positions for consumer-led industries. If I talk about payable-led industries, right, most organizations never pay suppliers on time. But that again gives an opportunity in terms of how can you mine your data to find out which supplier is giving you better payment terms. So let me give you another classic example. All of us believe in supplier diversification. All of us look at it at getting a supplier at the lowest cost. How many have used working capital credit period as a key decision point when we actually pick a supplier? Almost nobody does, right? How many of them we actually take a look at saying, is this supplier, it gives me better margin, but payment terms are slightly higher. Should I move that? The answer is no. So to be perfectly honest, I think from a working capital management perspective, most organizations, and again, bear with me, I'm generalizing it, are still using a very traditional method of managing working capital. And to a certain degree, because our adoption on sales of using machine learning to identify patterns, behavior trends, etc., are at a nascent stage. There are organizations which are getting adept at using it. And again, I go back to your sports example, where I think it's extensively used. I get better probability of whether India is going to win a match after the 30th over than I have accuracy of getting my working capital right every day. So I think that's where industries are in different stages. So I believe we have a huge way to go.
Completely.
Ramamurthy, I was looking for a counter for this. I couldn't find a counter what I told you since it's paper, but I didn't find a counter that you made to me. What I had said is the experience that we are going through. I am also from telecom sector for more than a decade and all. So we know that. But what I was telling about steel industry is they are relevant for, right?
No, I'm sorry. What I meant by saying, Raghu, was that I think in the commodities industries, you have an active, hedging market and a forward market, which gives you indicators. So that at least allows the raw material industries to be a little bit more mature. What generalistically, from my experience on working capital and in sales, is very, very few industries actually use any kind of automations to predict forward trends. There are very minority, but if I were to take a broad swath, I think there's a huge ways to go.
That's precisely was the point, my dear friend. That's what I said. There is a need for that. At this point of time, if you would have listened me carefully, we are using mostly manual.
So we are on the same page.
Yeah.
So, I mean, to be honest, yes, technology is something that we obviously want to have incorporated in our cash flow as well as budgeting exercise. And definitely this will give a boost to industries across, and it goes without any doubt. So moving on to the next question, and the most important and the most common topic is COVID. COVID keeps on, happening year on year with different variants and all that, and keeps on surprising. How do one generally, incorporate COVID in the entire planning stage and budgeting stage and all that? Neeraj, if you can throw some light over here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on this panel. Interesting topic, very relevant topic. And I guess across sectors, this is a topic where everybody will have not only a requirement, but also, some of the other implications in one way or another. You talked about COVID and how possibly it has impacted and what to watch out for now that we are all wiser by at least 2 years post, the last 2 years disruptive experience. So the first and foremost, in the context of working capital planning, I guess forecasting needs to be done at a more granular level. That's something COVID has taught us. And why? Because the degree of responsiveness, degree of resiliency expected in light of several large and small waves. You cannot now. It's very clear you can't have a 3 month, 1 year, 3 years plan and then just sit back and relax. The forecasting planning needs to be far more granular than probably what we used to have in the past. That's the point. That's point number one. Point number two is the need to track cash flows far more accurately and far more in a micro format. Because again, what this entire COVID disruption has taught us is one thing that obviously the need and the relevance of being on top of the cash flows was always there, but clearly now the slack has been shortened. Who had thought in the month of December that again in January there'll be a very sharp, sudden, though not as disruptive a wave, and then what happened last year in April and May, everyone knows about that. So track cash flows more accurately and far more granularly is the second point. And third is the last one is greater working capital oversight, because it's not just enough to say that look, we are billing, but and we need to pay our suppliers, but the point is that how effective are the working capital planning tools, right from whether it is inventory in case of, let's say, manufacturing or trading business entities, receivables probably impacts all businesses in one way or another, and then managing the suppliers, because let's also bear in mind there's an ecosystem that we all work with. And while it's important for us to get our cash flows sorted out, it's equally important for us to keep our suppliers channelized with the finances. So the entire working capital management rigor is, in my view, no longer restricted to ensuring that my backyard, my business should be ring fenced, but it's also about the entire ecosystem that we survive in or deal with, customers, suppliers, and so on and so forth. So these are the three main learnings. I'll just stop with these three, Vijay, where I guess if at all this COVID has now taught us, and hopefully we'll all be wiser going forward with these experiences.
Yeah, truly. So just wanted to check, so while forecasting and budgeting, which quarter do you put the COVID impact, or it just goes, around the corner, because we don't know which quarter it will impact the sales. So how is COVID incorporated in the budgeting exercise?
So that's where, when I said forecasting at a more granular level, what I meant was that, look, you can't really forecast. Even now, let's say we really don't know whether there'll be a fourth wave. Hopefully there won't be any, right? But then no one knows. Now you can't forecast that, and you can't, despite whatever mathematical models might be there, there's no way it can be forecasted. So what really is in our hands is getting more dynamic and more responsive to the changing market situations. Obviously, everyone will start off with a forecast or a plan on a quarterly, 6-monthly, annual, 3-year basis. But then equally, the agility to be able to come back on the drawing board, change the plans should there be disruption, and then go back in the market and then deal with it. I guess that's the new angle that has got inserted. So while currently it was driven because of the COVID realities and the disruptive elements of COVID, my view is that this learning can be put to use even in a post-COVID environment where plans and forecasts and budgets need not be hard-coded and so fixated that, look, this is what I'm going to track against. The agility to changing market dynamics, economic dynamics, business dynamics, political dynamics, now geopolitical dynamics is a reality. And we got to learn how to come back and respond, change, and quickly go back to the market and change the budgets, change the forecast as required.
So probably two versions, maybe COVID and non-COVID version of business plans running parallelly, and we pick up the plan as and when the event occurs.
I would go with only one version, because obviously the entire focus needs to be there on what the purpose and the goals and objectives are. What I meant is that have the agility to come back and moderate it, have the openness, flexibility, and ability to moderate it should that need arise.
Okay, good insight. So Ankur, anything from your side?
Yeah, no, I was just reflecting on what everyone mentioned. I think, and you mentioned about COVID, and then we again have a crisis event right now, which is shaking up the industry, which is the whole war situation. I think what I have seen as per the experience, and also as we build technology for companies, is that there needs to be a certain infrastructure that every company needs to build, and there are 2-3 dimensions to it. One, making sure that there's a very profound data lake. As Ramamurthy mentioned, that there's a need for forecasting, but that comes once you build a data lake, once you have strong data repository of your historic data. Second is having a platform approach, to sort of make sure that all of your functions, reporting, analytics, visualization, all of them are on your screen at one place. So when we work with CFOs, that's something we see as a strong need for solutions. That can I view everything at one place? Can I do the scenario analysis? Can I do the modeling on whatever data I have? So there's an increasing need for solutions like these, which are holistic, which are on one platform, and which then enable all of the things that the speakers mentioned here to be able to tackle situations like COVID or what we are going through now.
Okay. Sure. So moving on, just wanted to check, as we all know, cash is king, and we need to conserve cash and ensure that it is deployed correctly, and we recover monies on time, pay money accordingly, and all that. So what are the three key elements, while drawing a cash flow planning, budgeting, and all that? Mr. Ramamurthy, if you can throw some light over here. You're on mute.
Yeah, so to me, I think, as I said before, one of the most critical elements is to understand your business cycle and what are the various waxes and wanes that you typically go through it. So I think that is rudimentary. That's at the underlying underpinning of any good forecasting cycle, whether it be sales, cash flows, or anything around that. Once you've gotten that commercial understanding, the second element would be is what's happening to your broader industry, and are there any unique trends or events like happening? Like, for example, Raghu said what's happening on the global commodity space, or like Neeraj talked about in terms of the global geopolitical, what's likely to happen. I think that becomes a second critical element to it. And from a third element, I think it's like the conventional one in terms of your receivables and payment cycles. Are you looking to if you have an ambitious expansion growth plan, you may want to be a little bit more lax in terms of your receivable payment cycles, or if or there is too much competition and you're in a price war situation, so you may want to manage your receivables. So to me, understanding your sales and your sales cycles in your external environment. Second would be your understanding your organization's ambitions and how does working capital support or wane with that. And the last element would be is to understanding your profitability pressures if you have. So if you have got too much debt, then you may want to manage cash to release debt and improve your P&L, etc. Those three things is what I would say would be priority in managing working capital.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yes. So if Mr. Raghupati can also, share some insights around working capital management.
Vijay, if you see for any CFO, this is a very basic exercise as to what will be his OPEX, salary, etc., purchases, something, what kind of revenue he will be getting, CAPEX he will be getting. So this, any such way anybody will be doing. But three things stand out which need to be focused more, that is that first, not only because of the COVID and all, but normally there tend to be certain unforeseen cash outgo events happens in a business. Some income tax notice comes up for a 7-year period, or some amount which is bulky, some GST, certain quite a few. Some you have to because you can foresee that the raw material prices is going to be high, so you have to store it and all. So unforeseen events tend to happen. So there has to be a buffer. CFO has to keep a buffer for that, and preferably that should be restricted to the knowledge of that should be restricted to him, right? So that the normal general management this thing do not count upon that cash. So that buffer cash should be there for meeting any unforeseen cash outgo that comes in. Second thing is, it's very tricky, the realization of sales. If you see, ask any CFO from their experience, their sales people will give them a forecast which at the best will be 80% accurate. So the realization of sales, you have to go to that granular level and discount the promises that you will get from the salespeople, and keep the actual thing that will come from your own experience in your industry. That's the most. And here one has to differentiate the revenue and the cash that is coming. You can book any sales, any revenue you can book and be happy about it, have a good EBITDA and all. But what cash actually is into your bank account is really important. Here one has to be very careful, have a discounting factor from 10 to 30 or 40, depending upon the kind of organization and the kind of industry that is there, so that the forecast is accurate, and that way the CFO manage the cash. Third thing, what happens is that the need for capex. We normally organizations have a year-long capex budget with them and all, but it happens both way. Sometimes you do not spend the money that is earmarked for that, so that could be better utilized towards something else also. That need to be seen, and also need to be seen that if that is saved, then some other demands will come up. If we spend here, then it will be more profitable, or some alternate capex program will come and all. So that having a very tight leash over the capex program and how it is happening, the functioning, how it is going through the progress there, one need to have a check on that. So these three, apart from the routine things that every CFO does, these are the focus area.
Yeah, completely. The CFO cash, which need not be disclosed to the management, is the key, along with the other elements that he spoke about, which I completely agree. And the fact of the matter remains that obviously during the course of the year there will be months where the balances will definitely not meet the budget numbers, and then we as a CFO tend to try to do some kind of arrangement to ensure that the cash flow doesn't go in red, and thereby ensuring the complete safe floating of the company. Moving on, and this is my favorite question, and I've been implementing this right from the start of my career. Just wanted to check, does CFO with the changing environment and changing perception about a CFO and the finance function, so does CFO co-own the P&L with the CEO, or it's just that CFO still manages their own taxation, treasury piece, and keeps the business with the business guys and the CEO? Mr. Neeraj, if you can have some inputs on this.
Sure. Yeah, very important, interesting question to ask, Vijay. So the CFO's role, I would say more so in the last 10 years maybe, has undergone a tectonic transformative shift. It's completely changed. It's no longer a traditional compliance-centric taxation or treasury or accounts or audit role. Those are there, those deliverables are there. But the CFO's role has become very, very different. It's more strategically oriented role now, where you're asking whether the CFO owns the P&L. I would say the CFO owns the entire strategy development and strategy execution with the CEO and rest of the management team. So the CFO's role is that, if I can use an analogy here, is that like of a seat belt in a car. Unless you have a strong and a very effective set of seat belts, both for the driver and the passengers, you won't feel safe while driving fast. So that belt is needed for you to drive fast and as swiftly as you can on the expressway or the highway. That's the CFO's role, so that when the brakes are slammed or the brakes need to be slammed, the passengers are kept safe. So that's how I see this. The CFO is the new economist for the business. Of course, there are certain sectors which have a chief economist role separately carved out. But in most, I would say, sectors, the CFO should double up as the chief economist, the CFO should develop as the chief risk officer. So the enterprise risk responsibility, and specifically if you look at the COSO framework 2017, it talks about strategy and performance. That's squarely, in my view, CFO's agenda. And CFO is the external face for not just going to the bankers, but the entire management of external stakeholders, investors, bankers, and also making sure that the story is adequately spread and adequately understood. So the role has changed, and in my view, it's become a very exciting role as we live it currently.
So if I may just ask here, if suppose CEO and the business team has given a target saying that okay, this is the revenue number that you have to hit, and over a period of the year you realize that okay, there is a struggle over there and the budget seems to be too high, would then a CFO step in and try to track it and make sure that get into the shoes of CEO and try to make those sales happening, or speak to various buyers, etc.?
I would look at it a little differently. See, again, there's a conscience keeper role as well. In the list of roles I talked about, I forgot to mention governance. So there's a governance oversight role as well. Now, here is where your question becomes relevant. Now, if the business is tracking behind sales targets or business objectives, then what should the CFO do? Does he step into the role or the shoes of the sales head or the CEO? I don't think so. I don't think the CFO needs to step into anyone's shoes. The CFO's role will be to kind of have a very realistic. So there are two sides to it. One is have a very realistic sense of realism on the management table, so that everyone knows what they are going after, and it's stretched, but it's doable, achievable, and it's realistic without necessarily cutting corners or doing something which later on one has to regret. So that's one dimension. The other dimension is also to roll up the sleeves and go there in the market to the extent and as and when required. Be there with the sales team, meeting customers or trying to convince customers and be the spokesperson. So that would be more of a partnering approach rather than having to step into someone's shoes. But playing that dual role very effectively. One is the custodian of governance and all the principles around governance, and at the same time walking the hard path as well. So he has to do both, or she has to do both.
Completely agree to this. Ankur, anything that you would like to add to this? Please unmute.
Yeah, no, I was just reflecting on the role of CFO, right? And what I can add to this is today CFO is a guardian, right? So his role is to actually establish the right FP&A function to make sure that they are able to assist or sort of problem solve the business needs, right? And what that entails is a strong FP&A team in terms of technology, in terms of awareness of analytics, in terms of very strong awareness of the industry, business drivers, being able to look at data and help the business head understand the trends or the levers to unlock the P&L, whether it is top line or bottom line. So I think that's where the CFO's role is also very important in setting up the right capability in the FP&A function, which is what was the start of the topic of this debate, right? Of this discussion, that how is the finance planning and budgeting evolving? So what I see is that it is not just a functional role where someone has to prepare the financials, AOP, etc., but it is very, very closely knit with how the business will move, or what are the levers to unlock, either for growth or for solving and navigating through crisis.
Yeah. So if we move on, I think while we have spoken about cash flow management, P&L management, everything on that sort, how do CFO then play a role while drafting those the P&Ls and cash flow to ensure that we are actually getting into the cost optimization and a revenue maximization work, where while we may draft and put a number at the cost level and at the revenue side, but tracking it and ensuring it that we are getting the services at the right price, we are selling the service at the right price, is something that a CFO generally had to do it. So I just wanted to check from Mr. Neeraj, if you can just help us out understand this particular piece.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, this is, I would say, bread and butter for any CFO's office, cost and revenue both. See, on the cost side, even before we dive deep into cost optimization, cost reduction, cost management, all those are anyway generally top on everyone's mind. There's a couple of very critical primers that are required. First and foremost is the awareness and education around the cost management. Firstly, do the business leaders understand the cost structures? Do they understand what drives cost? What are the cost levers? What is the nature of cost? How much of the cost is fixed? How much of the cost is variable, and how much is semi-variable? So there's a lot of priming work that gets into that ideally should be spent before really one dives and just talks about, okay, these are the cost trends. So that having done that, because that helps a business leader to understand, okay, fine, what is driving my cost, and then what can I do about that driver before I look at my budgets. Benchmarking cost is another area which becomes very important before understanding whether there is because finally it all boils down to the impact, the spend impact rather than the spend itself. The spend may be and usually is necessary, but then is it delivering the right impact on the table? So benchmarking generally helps with that to understand that. Last but not the least are the trends and budgetary controls, where typically, yes, cost, if it can be budgeted at a level where it is being committed and at the right level, it can be influenced if any moderation is needed, specifically for discretionary cost elements, for cost elements where there's an element of influence and oversight. And quite a bit is about, like I said in the beginning, it's about the proportion of fixed and variable. How to have without cutting corners, without stopping costs from incurred. Can it become more variabilized rather than more fixed oriented? And there are ways and means of doing that without impacting the business. So that's the cost bucket. You talked about revenue. So revenue monitoring, revenue tracking. Clearly, there's a role of data analytics and technology. So clearly, whether it's the deployment of a good quality business intelligence tool, where which can be used, which can be deployed to draw insights, data visualization tools on revenue, because the more one can slice and dice revenue across different criteria and different dimensions, again, a sales team or a business team will be able to do something about it in terms of optimizing, maximizing sales mix, revenue mix, sales realization, and so on and so forth. So revenue is more to do with having the CFO's office do a good quality analytics and helping develop those dashboards and those insights, which can help take real-time decisions and implement them real-time as much as possible. But clearly, these are two very critical topics where CFO indeed plays or should play a key role. I agree with that.
So going deep dive, understanding the business, understanding the dynamics, and figuring out whether there is a possibility of cost optimization as well as revenue maximization is something that, yes, a CFO needs to do. Mr. Raghupati, any thoughts from your side?
Yeah, see, as far as cost optimization is concerned, CFOs are the pioneers in this. There is nobody in the organization who have the insight, the drive, the appetite for the drive, and the requisite authority also, because CFO has the authority to stop also everything. So to go for cost optimization. So what has happened is that over the years, most of the CFOs go for cost optimization kind of. If you see, around 80% of CFOs, even if they focus on revenue, their primary drive is on cost optimization. However, if you see some of the industry where like telecom and IT and all, CFOs are more into revenue maximization there. If I recall my stint as finance head in Airtel, in Bihar and Jharkhand circle, where we have a yearly revenue of 2,500 crores when we have started, and within 2 years' time we got into that level. The CFO has equal role to play as the marketing in getting all the products signed up. So you need to know, as per the business planning and analysis is one of the best department within the finance in a telecom. Each of the minute that the customer spends in calling or receiving the calls or making a SMS or something, or all the revenue, or downloading some app or downloading something, each of that we track it. So through data analytics and all, along with when the marketing comes up with something, some new products like a STD cutter, somebody has a more STD rates, we're paying 1 rupee, so you pay 30 rupees and you have a 60 paise per minute kind of. So these are through data analytics. The CFO along with the CMO develops the products also and sign that off also. So revenue maximization in that point of view, that's through IT industry also. I have spent 2 decades in these 2 industries, so I understand how it is. So CFO there has to understand the total market dynamics, market outlook, what are the segmentation, how the customer behaviors are, what are the product mix, how the product wise contribution could come, where, how you leverage that, a total set of things that which the chief marketing officer drives. You need to have a better understanding of that, link that with your financial objective to that, and also have a cost optimization in spend for new marketing intervention has to be done for a new product and all. So all these 3 things, which is a 360-degree thing that you do, only CFO can do that in any organization. So that we have been doing 15 years before.
So basically an entrepreneurial approach to the work that we do. Completely agree.
Every CFO in these industries generally does this.
Mr. Ramamurthy, if you want to add something over here.
No, I think the previous panelists spoke very effectively. I think the only thing I would come back and say is, while cost optimization is extremely critical, what we also need to come back and take a look at it is one is cost optimization from a traditional lens, but second element is how do we transform the nature of the business using digitization as tools and mechanisms, right? So the core element, I think, is the world is changing around us, and we need to learn how to leverage and adopt digitizations as a tools and mechanisms to effectively drive performance. To give you a quick example, let's say before the pandemic, how many of us would have imagined that we may or may not need offices at all? Or how many of us has imagined every CFO's bugbear would be saying his travel cost is too high, but last 2 years, nobody ever traveled. So now the technology has adapted and evolved, and these are just very 2 hard examples, is that we need to take a relook and reimagine our entire businesses as new nimble startups would do, and take that as a lens to come back and say, how do we transform our organizations in that lens? So that will give us new avenues to look at cost optimization as avenues for ideas.
Completely. So just to wind up the session, I have one question which has come from one of the listeners. Sumit G asks that as a CFO, how do you make cash as an agenda and accountability of all the department rather than only finance? So who would want to?
If I may.
Yeah, please, Raghu.
What happens is that it is the CFO's role to tell other departments that we are in the business of making profit. We are not here for a dharamshala or something, or goshala or something, right? We are not running any charity organization. We are there to make profit. And for that, we are together here as an organization. That's what we are driving to. So any intervention, anything that we do, we all owe it, and we have to own, every department has to own that we have to, as a team, we have to deliver the budget or the objective that we have set up, that we'll deliver this. This is a given, and the rigorously and continuously, I'll say that You have to be continuously harping these to the people. That's what a CFO does.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think I'll just add to what Raghu said. I think that's absolutely right. I loved it when he said we are not running a dharamshala. So I think that's going to resonate with me. But I think the only thing I would add to what he has said is it's a very interesting question: is how do you get the rest of the business to align with with cash as an objective? Because profit and sales, everybody understands. Cash is not as well understood. I think there is no one single answer to this problem. So to give you a quick example, let's say you talk about someone in the procurement function, someone like in, let's say in raw materials, where you for manufacturers, their objective might be largely focused around you need to make sure stock availability, right? And they may or may not focus on working capital improvement. So if that becomes an organizational measure and it is critical, then everyone should carry that as an incremental target, right? One more element could be, let's say in technology, we always take a look at technology availability, speed, efficiency, etc. But does technology have co-share a performance indicator, like how much prepayment you're making or how much licenses are you buying? So cost is natural. So I think every function will have a different mechanisms based on behavior you want to drive. And that's something we need to inculcate across every function within the organization. And all of which culminating to Raghu's point is, remind, we are not running a dharamshala.
Yeah, completely. Here we end this session. Thank you all for participating and, sharing your experience, thoughts on this important topic called, cash management, forecasting, and budgeting.
Thank you, Vijay.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Vijay, for moderating this. Thank you, everyone.
Very good. Thank you, panelists.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Diksha.
Bye.